Welcome to History How-Tos, instructional guides and videos made by history teachers for history teachers. My name is Greg Thornton, and today I'm going to look at multiple choice questions, or MCQs. Now, as usual, there is a sheet to accompany this video that I'm doing, which you can download from the website, and it contains everything that I'm going to be going through today in probably more detail, whereas today, this video, I'm going to be covering the basics and showing you some examples of what MCQs look like within the history classroom. So to get started, what are multiple choice questions? Well, multiple choice questions are basically a method of assessment that allow us to check knowledge and unpick misconceptions. So they're a type of assessment, whether it's formative or summative, as we'll see, that allows you to check knowledge and, importantly, really pick up misconceptions and errors that you can fix. So what does research say about multiple choice questions? Now, there is actually an insane wealth of evidence here. I got lost in a rabbit hole doing the research for this myself, so I've tried to really hone it down to some of the essentials. And one of the people that I love as a head researcher and an educator, and he was a history teacher, is Harry Fletcher Wood. And he's done loads of work on multiple choice questions, particularly hinge questions. And he says that MCQs are like a great diagnostic tool. They're almost a health check for your lesson. And they allow you to make a really good inferences, like reliable and relatively valid ones if they're designed well, about a student's learning and allowing you to move forward in this. And he really pushes them as a formative tool, which I'll talk about in a moment. Thinking about quizzing and retrieval as a whole, a lot of you know about the Willingham's memory model here, which Oliver. So what does the research say about multiple choice questions? Now, one of the people that I really rate as an educator and who's written some fantastic books is Harry Fletcher Wood, and he really pushes the idea that a multiple choice question is a powerful diagnostic tool, like a health check within the lesson. He really emphasises the formative nature of multiple choice questions, and he says you can make some really powerful inferences about students' learning and understanding from them. And then moving on to the work on retrieval practice, the memory that Daniel Willingham and many other education researchers have done. We know that retrieval practice is a powerful tool for strengthening remembering and long-term memory and reducing load on your working memory. We know that already, and if we do want to learn more, Rachel Ball's done a wonderful sheet and video on this. But Willingham has said that multiple choice questions are a really good way of using retrieval to build memory and help remembering. So yes, a great low stakes tool. Joe Kirby, who was at Michaela for many years, he's talked about the benefits of MCQs in reducing workload. Once a bank of them is made and designed in a department, which is a great thing to do them together so you can identify good questions, misconceptions you want to test. So once you've done this, they're a great workload tool. And he also supports the idea of them being a formative assessment tool, using them to see where students are and then act accordingly. Daisy Christodoulou, author of Making Good Progress, an all-round assessment wizard, has acknowledges though that multiple questions are very hard to write, and from experience I would certainly agree with them with this point here. You need to have good strong subject knowledge before you are writing them, and you need time to get them to write. I'll talk about this later in the do's and don'ts, but they are hard to do, and there's a couple of things you need to think about when you are doing them. So using worked examples in the classroom, and there's two ways that MCQs can be used. They can either be used as formative assessment, and I love this way of thinking about it, and I think about whole class feedback in the same way. It's a tuning fork to test student understanding. You can do this formatively within the lesson, during the lesson, at the end of the lesson is an exit ticket to see where students are and whether they've understood a concept or some knowledge that you've just taught within the lesson, whether they remember it from last lesson through a low stakes test. You can do a 5-question do now, or you can use a hinge question within the lesson. I'm going to talk about hinge questions later. I love them, and that's a big thing that Harry Fletcher Wood has written about. Or you can use it for summative assessment. They're probably less used in England as summative assessment, especially in history. You know, they are part of the science GCSE, but in history we don't really use them because we are an essay-based subject. They don't often get used, but you know, in the States, multiple choice questions are massive. I think all the way up to university, they are still used as like end of unit assessments, and I think you can use them at Key Stage 3 and even at Key Stage 4 to test the breadth and depth of a unit that you've studied. You know, and with 20 to 50 questions, you can get a really precise bit of feedback on what the class do and do not know. And I'll talk about this later, actually using them as summative assessments, mixing up your type of assessment that you do within the classroom. So what types of multiple choice questions are there? There's a different variety of ones that you can use. This one called Best Answer. So these are kind of great for hinge questions and teasing out misconceptions. Is you could have a statement, you know, and you say, which of these best explains a concept? So which of these statements best explains what communism is? And you could maybe have 4 options. Which of these best? Or you could have one statement and say, is this a best or least best representation of what communism looks like? They're really good to summarise and kind of pull apart a really tight definition of something. And students can pick which one is the best option. So, and I'll show you an example soon. And a really good way to develop this, and this is what Blake Harvard has suggested, is getting students to explain why they've made these decisions. You know, why are they picking this? Not just saying, oh, I picked B, you know, and getting every kid to put their hand up and B, and well done. I want you to tell me why you've picked that. Why is that the answer? And also, why are these non-examples the incorrect ones to use? You know, why is this wrong? Love using this, and I'll talk about this soon. You can use them as a hinge question, where you simply pose one MCQ to a class after you've taught something or at the end of the lesson, and you get students to answer on a mini whiteboard. So read this statement, first question, which of these is it? Write it on a mini whiteboard, and they can hold up the whiteboard with A, B, or C. This is my little mini whiteboard here. And another way you can do this is I get kids to put their heads on the desk and put up their hand up when I read A, B, or C. So that kind of reduces the impact of other students. You know, this like sheep effect, really. I'm sure there's a fancier name for it, but if a student goes, well, those guys next to me putting their hand up at B, I'm going to vote for that too. Heads down or writing it on a whiteboard independently reduces the impact of students cheating, effectively, and being influenced by others. And what you can then do with a hinge question, though, is that you can immediately get a grasp of where students are at right now. And if you think, oh, half the class they've not got that, they've not understood Article 48, I can reteach that, or I can move on. Wonderful, wonderful tool, a hinge question. You should use them all the time. And ranking as well, you can rank things on the most and least to correct. So which of these is the most correct answer for this? And you could have multiple options here. And you think, which is the most applicable to this? And you can also rank the confidence between some of these options. So you can rank multiple choice questions as well. Again, a really powerful tool here. Blake Harvard, again, has written loads about this. Couple of do's and don'ts, though. Now, I've picked these up from a wonderful blog by Dawn Cox, some of the work of Phil Stock. And these are some of the real things that they say. If you want to make multiple choice questioning valid, reliable, and as powerful as possible, these are the do's and don'ts. So these are the do's. The question needs to be clear and concise. You do not want students to get confused by the question that they are being asked. 3 or 4 options, so A, B, C, or D, is the maximum amount that they would recommend. Keep incorrect answers linked to the topic and use common misconceptions. And this is the one that I notice sometimes when I see multiple choice questions shared. They'll say, who was the leader of Nazi Germany? And the options will be Adolf Hitler, Henry VIII, Winston Churchill, and President Nixon. Now, obviously, there's only one right answer there, Adolf Hitler. But those non-examples, those non-answers are so obviously wrong that students aren't being tested, are they? You want the answers to link to the topic and be a common misconception. You want to pick something that you know they get wrong. A question should tell test a single skill. You only want to find out one bit of knowledge within that question. So if you want to find out multiple, split them into 2 or 3 questions. But you should only want to find out one thing from that one question. Too many things, you're adding too many variables that you can't really make clear inferences from. One of the good things that ideas that I've been using is I don't know yet. How often do you know that? How often do students guess the answer? Probably quite commonly, don't they? And if you put I don't know yet, at least it gives them the option to say I don't know this, and then you know that you need to teach that to the class. And one of the things you can do to kind of increase rigor and the challenge is you could offer multiple correct answers here. And you can either say pick 2, or you could even just say pick 1, and then you can have a debate about which one of these is the best, is the correct answer. Which one would you choose? And they're really good for thinking about interpretations. Which of these best represents the view of this historian? Things you should not do. And this kind of links to the first one. The question stem, so the question itself shouldn't confuse or give clues. And I remember myself, I got Phil Stock to look at a quiz I'd done once, and he was like, "You've given them the answer offensively in the question itself." So I was like, I need to make sure I don't do that again. Avoid using all or none of the above as options. Incorrect answers must not be obviously wrong or silly. I've talked about that already. The question shouldn't be answered based on an opinion. It should be based on fact only, really. And another thing that they've also said, try not to use negative wording. So Louis Pasteur did not discover these. They really don't think you should use the idea of not. The negative wording is not a good thing to do. So let's have a look at some examples of how we can use multiple choice questions within the classroom. So, source questions. Now, Paula Lobworth, a fantastic blog. I absolutely love her blog. One of the best ones out there. And just a great historian. She wrote a blog about 2 years ago about how she uses MCQs for source questions to build up that knowledge. And I suppose this idea of when you're introducing source questions to students, which I think they're some of the hardest wing source analysis questions, is that do it slowly. Build from the ground up. Treat them like novices. They are. And using source questions and MCQs allows you to practice certain skills. So, for example, if you have a question, this was used to tell us about the problems facing stretcher bearers, they have to pick which bit of content best shows that. So they pick one of them which best represents the answer to the question. Then they can pick knowledge that best supports the either inference or the message they've got. And then lastly, they can talk about provenance. What about the provenance is useful? And I think this is a really good way to hone in on certain parts of source utility that you want to focus on. I'm just going to quickly ignore that low battery sign. We do not want that going. There we go. Looking at provenance is really, for example, is a thing that I find hard to teach sometimes. My students really struggle with. And if you can practice just multiple choice stuff on this, on getting them fluid in picking the right statements, that allows them to move on to the writing it themselves. Wonderful technique. So thank you, Paula, for introducing this. Hinge questions. I use these all the time within lessons and even in my booklets recently. And you simply, four options to summarise or represent, and A, B, C, or D. And we call it Mr. Misconception because I'm an absolute loser. And you basically I get them to do it, put their hand down, put their hand up when I call it out, and then we talk about which ones are the right and wrong answers. Really good way of doing it. And then I can essentially reteach that. Good for booklets too, because they just circle it, and then they tell me why they picked their answer, making them do something else with their knowledge. Rather than maybe having a guess, they have to be able to explain it. And I always emphasise this in class. You have to be able to tell me why you've picked that. And it's this idea of cold call, really. You're all going to have this question. You're all going to have to make a decision. So I need you to be able to explain why, because I'm going to pick on someone to explain to me why is C the wrong answer. Okay? So the DAP one's a really good one here. Who were the DAP? The Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. They were a popular right-wing party that had national socialist ideas and wanted to destroy the TOV. Well, they weren't popular, were they? They were a very small group, under 200 members at first. So some of that's right. So I'm setting up a bit of a misconception here, but they weren't popular. How can you use it for live feedback? Now, this is a thing that I've started doing in the last few years. I mainly do it at GCSE, and I actually got this from a maths colleague once when we did a CPD session. And again, maths are great to pick up new ideas from. They're outstanding in maths. I think they're ahead of the game in pedagogy, and especially evidence-based practice sometimes. And what you can do here is use multiple choice questions for like a live feedback task. So what I kind of do here is, at the end of a topic, so medieval medicine, I'll do a quiz that's maybe 40, 50 questions long. And I will not take the scores. And I really emphasize this. I don't care what you get. That doesn't mean don't try. But I want them to do the best they can. And I want to use this as a way of identifying what things they do and don't know and what we can fix. I give them the option of I don't know. And each within the 50 questions, there's 5 on each subtopic. So there might be 5 questions on treatment, 5 questions on prevention, 5 questions on the Black Death here. And as students are going through this in silence on their own, I will have the results live on my screen. And if I go, right, over 50% of students have just bombed that question, have got it wrong, right, stop there. Let's talk about this question here, because half of you have got this wrong. And we'll talk about it, discuss it, and then I will reteach it to them then and there. And they will write this out. They will write out their improvement, a redefinition or whatever in their books. And this is one we actually did for the American West. Some of them got confused about the Oregon Trail. It had been a while since we'd studied it. So using the class, we actually collaboratively did this. We wrote out a little definition of what the Oregon Trail was again. And then that, as a class, allowed students who got it wrong to both have it fixed, go over it again, and students who were maybe on the, unsure side, that solidified it. And then thirdly, it allowed students who knew it and mastered it to go over it again and really cement that in their schema, their understanding about American West and the early reasons for migration west. Great tool, life about. And Socrative is my go-to. I know some people use Google Forms and the Microsoft version. I just love Socrative. It's wonderful. Okay. And my last one for you is, how can you break tradition? How can you use multiple choice questioning as a summative assessment way? We do 2 inquiries, sometimes 3, depending on the length of them, per half term. Now, I only expect 1 piece of extended writing at Key Stage 3 per half term. I'm really aware of my department workload, and we wanted ways to try and assess them on a unit, but without having to do a huge essay every time. So one of the things we've been looking at is obviously these mini assessments. That's all self-marking or peer marking. And we've been looking at how can we do one based on multiple choice questions. And if you think about multiple choice questions, if you do one, say 40, 50 questions, you can actually test not only knowledge, which is the main thing, but you can test the substantive concepts. You can test causation through multiple choice quizzing. Can't you really? You can break it down into which of these best represents a long-term cause, which of these led to this. You can break down significance, causation, source work, as I've talked about, interpretations work, into a multiple choice question. So why not try that? Why not break tradition from doing traditional essays that, powerful thing, we do need to do them for GCSE. But why not try different ways of summative assessment by using multiple choice questions? Give them a go, please do. We like them, and we can get a really good grasp of what students can and can't do. We do writing in lessons, but a different way to break things up. So that is that really. Some further reading for you. Daisy Christodoulou's Making Good Progress is outstanding on assessment in general, and really good on multiple choice questions. Harry Fletcher Wood's Responsive Teaching, probably my favourite book of, say, 2018. When I started doing the Chartered College programme, his book was my guide, and it's all about formative assessment and using cognitive science in practice. Love that, and because he's a history teacher, uses loads of great examples from history. And if you want someone to follow on Twitter, Blake Harvard, the Effortful Educator, his website is amazing, and he has done some insane work on multiple choice questions. And I've only really started to, dip my finger into some of the work, dip my toe, into some of the work that he's done. It's fantastic. So please do check him out. And as always, thank you for listening. Please do visit the site, download the guides, subscribe to His TV on Tom's channel, and do get involved. We are desperate for people to share their expertise. There is an insane community of history teachers out there. I'd say one of the best there is, and we really do want people to share what they're doing in class, guides on how to do stuff, whether it be teaching a topic to using a resource or using cognitive science and I suppose like general pedagogy within the history classroom. So yeah, thank you as always. Thank you.